Hello and welcome back to the Shiki Science Show. So in today's video we're going to look at the question, is calorie restriction legit? So to help break this question down, I have split this video into 4 different sections. So firstly, I'll give a definition of what is calorie restriction. Then we'll look at what I mean when I say legit for what. And then we'll look at the evidence so far for calorie restriction in animal models and in humans and their effect. So firstly, a definition. So one definition for calorie restriction is the chronic reduction of total calorie intake without malnutrition, the importance being without malnutrition. So the point is that calorie restriction isn't just not eating, it's about reducing food intake by around 20 to 40%. And it doesn't mean just eating salads, it's still important to maintain a balance of different food components. And so this is where calorie restriction may differ from another phrase known as dietary restriction, where you might restrict just one component of the diet, such as fat or protein. So calorie restriction kind of comes underneath dietary restriction, but they aren't quite the same thing, at least not by definition. So why are we even talking about calorie restriction? What is the point of this video? So firstly, calorie restriction is a mechanism to facilitate weight loss, which, as you can probably guess, is due to the fact that you're reducing the calorie intake, so the energy intake, so that the balance changes so that you are going to lose weight. Secondly, calorie restriction has been shown to improve metabolic biomarkers, and I'll go into more detail about that later, because it kind of ties into the last legit association of calorie restriction, which is the ability to prolong lifespan. So is this really the case? Well, there is evidence to support that calorie restriction extends lifespan in all model organisms tested so far. So that's not quite the case. It extends lifespan in most, not quite all, but this has been shown in different model organisms, ranging from yeast, worms, flies, and in mice. And so in some cases, calorie restriction has been shown to enhance health span as opposed to lifespan, and the extent to which you get these improvements also varies depending on the extent of the restriction and depending on the organism. And so there's just many variables to take into account. But I guess the key question is why? Why would calorie restriction help to either enhance health span or to extend lifespan? So the best way to illustrate this is to go back to the hallmarks of aging, which I explained in a previous video, and I'll put the description for you up. And so based on a wide range of both genetic and biochemical evidence, it seems that high nutrient signaling stimulates or increases the rate of protein, lipid and DNA damage, and the antagonistic hallmarks that all respond to increase the process of aging, whereas calorie restriction inevitably prevents high nutrient signaling and therefore doesn't increase this rate of aging. And so that's the premise behind linking calorie restriction to enhancements in both health span and lifespan. And so that video on the hallmarks of aging will give a better insight into these different mechanisms. But to briefly summarise and give a more mechanistic underpinning to this increased aging rate, having a high or normal nutrition increases the activity of proteins called IGF-1 and mTOR, and also the mitochondrial activity. And it also has the effect of reducing the activity of AMPK and sirtuins. And these are both connected in a process called autophagy. And so they get decreased, and so the rate of autophagy also decreases. And so as autophagy is the cell's recycling system and effectively removes dysfunctional proteins, aggregates, organelles that are in the cell, if autophagy decreases, then you're not going to be able to remove these aggregates and dysfunctional protein, and hence you're more likely to increase damage in the cell, and this all in all kind of leads to aging. And so further evidence for linking these different pathways to health span and calorie restriction is when calorie restriction has been combined in animal models with inhibition of other proteins. So take mTOR for instance. When mTOR is inhibited by itself, you often see an increase in the health span and lifespan of the different model organisms. Yet when it's combined with calorie restriction, as has been seen in yeast and worms, there is no enhanced effect. And in fact, this seems to suggest that the two mechanisms are acting through the same pathway, one of which could be autophagy. So now for the bit that you're probably here for, calorie restriction in humans. So firstly, just a disclaimer, I'm not here to try to promote calorie restriction or to say that this is something that we should all be doing. I don't do it personally. I'm just here to discuss and illustrate the evidence so far for calorie restrictions and the impact that has in humans. Firstly, because there may be medical reasons or other reasons why it's an unsafe thing to just jump into. And secondly, because a lot of the evidence has still come from model organisms. And obviously model organisms aren't the same as humans. Nonetheless, studies have been done in humans. And so this paper here has the results for a 2-year study where calorie restriction was carried out in young and middle-aged non-obese men and women. And so the name of the study was Calorie, for comprehensive assessments of long-term effects of reducing intake of energy. I am a fan of the name. So what did they see after 24 months? So at the end of the study, they saw that there was a reduction in fasting insulin levels, body temperature, resting energy expenditure, oxidative stress, and circulating levels of TNF-alpha, which is linked with causing inflammation in the body. And so these are kind of hallmarks that correlate with a longer health span, as has been seen in different model organisms. But going back to my disclaimer, whether calorie restriction extends lifespan in humans will probably never be determined in randomized clinical trials. And so the point of studies like this one is to just assess the feasibility, the safety, and potential impact that this could have as a potential therapy or treatment for different diseases. And so it's not me recommending that you do this right now. And in addition to using calorie restriction potentially in therapy in the future, another study came out literally just the other day about using alternate day fasting, which along with intermittent fasting and the other kind of 5-2 fasting trends, so they're called at the moment, are also being studied to see how that can alter metabolic biomarkers in the body that can give an indication of surpassing different diseases. And so this video was, to introduce you to where we are currently at with understanding calorie restriction and its potential benefits for the body, but it's by no means telling you right now to do it. So with that, thanks for listening.